In today's episode, we're going to be looking at Geelong, how they went in 2022, and we're joined by a special guest, Shorty. How you doing, Shorty?
Mate. Yeah, good. How are you travelling?
I'm very good. Glad to have you on the show, and we'll chat Geelong. Obviously, there's not many negative things you can talk about Geelong's 2022, but happy to divulge and get in there and see your opinion on a few different things.
Definitely, yes. A very happy Cats fan, no doubt about that.
Yeah, just chatting Geelong. Obviously, your ladder position this year was first, so congratulations. Can't complain about that. Got to be pretty happy being the premiers this year.
Mate, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. How long did it take you to kind of recover and not get over it, but just kind of go back to daily life again?
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I mean, that sort of week after the game, you're still sort of pinching yourself and just riding the highs, remembering all those great moments. Probably after that week, you settle back in. But even now, I just sometimes sort of think, gee, how good was that? How lucky were we to be at the game and that type of thing? So, no, it was pretty special. I was very lucky, like I said, to be there, be at all the finals, actually. So, yeah, my feet are starting to touch the ground again.
Yeah, imagine it's a bit like people who were Melbourne fans the year before, first time in 56 years. Similar to you guys, it's definitely been, not a while, but it's coming. Did you kind of feel like going into 2022 that this was going to be your year? Or you were just kind of like, hoping like everyone else?
Oh, probably not, to be honest. It was more hope. I think I did a bit of a season prediction at the start of the year and had us down at fourth. I probably thought we could be good enough if it all came together, which it did. But I honestly was pretty fearful that maybe we'd had so many chances. We'd knocked on the door a few times with prelims and grand finals. And I thought, maybe they're slightly on the downhill front now. But they did pull it together beautifully. So I was absolutely stoked. But yeah, I didn't see it coming until probably halfway through the year. I started to believe a little bit.
Yeah. I guess it's like one of those things where obviously people called you guys not the retirement home, but a lot of older players. You'd kind of be feeling like, hey, slipping away from us a little bit. How did you feel the inclusion of Stengel last year really helped the side along? Was he kind of the missing piece? Or was it more a case of, like you were saying, everything just coming together at the right time?
Yeah, he was pretty huge. I mean, he was a big part of it because we probably had some dangerous forwards, but not really the smalls. We had a lot of pressuring type forwards, but not necessarily those goal sneaks that could just create something out of nothing. We hadn't really had that for some time. I think Stengel coming on board and being exactly that helped. The improvement of Brad Close was huge, but I think probably, there were personnel that really helped, but mainly just a change in game style and looking to be a bit more proactive with the footy, take a few more risks. I think that was probably the main thing that was able to really produce. And then, of course, Cameron being fit and firing and then that type of thing worked out beautifully. But, yeah, Stengel was certainly a welcome addition up forward.
Yeah. And rise of, like, your younger players in SDK as well, right? I know he was great for my Supercoach team this year, but that obviously reflects how well he did on field.
Yeah, mate, absolutely. Some of those intercept marks were pretty tasty for the old Supercoach. But, yeah, and the flow-on effect from him, which I thought he'd be a really good player, but I didn't think he'd have the year that he had. But by him doing that, it allowed Blitzarves and Stanley to be this role that I'd never really seen or thought of before, where you could ruck and then float back and one could be a midfielder. So it really unlocked that to be a real weapon for the Cats, which is probably what the D's are going to try and do this year. But no, he was crucial, wasn't he? He was very crucial.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the standouts for me a little bit was Tom Atkins. So I know he's always been somewhat solid, but he was putting up a couple of games, I think, of like 30 plus possessions, really being that kind of soldier through the midfield and the back line, right?
Yeah, so true. I think Tom had probably been dying to play midfield for a while, and he finally got that chance. He had some big games and some big quarters. I remember against Port Adelaide, he was huge in that last quarter, and I think it might have been the qualifying final that you've got up there on the screen. I think he was pretty massive in certain stages of that. So, yeah, he was very, very good. And with Selwood going, like he's a player that'll, again, look to get a bit more midfield time when he can.
Yeah, definitely. What do you think's kind of happened with players like Meningola? Do you reckon they might get traded at some point or delisted? I know you guys have got rid of, well, we'll talk about kind of a few of the other players who have left, but it seems like Geelong, instead of having, from an outside perspective, maybe 26 or so players that were coming in and out of the side, that's now moved a lot down to like a 23, where outside of injuries, your set team is basically set now. Do you feel like those kind of players who were big, 2 or 3 years ago, will find another team, or what's the feeling kind of there?
I feel like someone like Menegola will probably find it difficult to get back into the team. It's probably just when a side is so filled with talent, has a lot of depth, you don't want to get injured at the wrong time. And Menegola was sort of that. I think he had concussion troubles and maybe even some knee issues at times. And he was always coming from a long way back, and Geelong sort of found their mix and were going to go with that. So it's not to say that players like him and other guys around that age could have a great pre-season and break in, but the same sort of blokes, which we'll touch on throughout this, some of the younger guys we brought in, they'll be thinking the same thing. They'll be thinking, I'm a good pre-season away from getting in this 22. So from a Cats point of view, it's a good feeling to have. But honestly, I couldn't see too many more AFL games for Sammy. But again, he's not bad to have in the wings because he can come in and play a role. There's no doubt.
No, definitely. So checking out the ladder position, obviously you guys were first. 18 wins and 4 losses. So you got to be pretty happy with that. And a massive percentage of 144. So that kind of shows that, your losses were small, small points losses, but your wins were actually quite big as well. A couple of blowout games, definitely through the season there. And we had your best game this year, which was, I think it's the preliminary final. So just, first season of the final gives you the bye round versus Collingwood. I remember this game being quite close. You were saying that you watched this game live?
Oh, yeah, mate. I only just got through it. I don't remember being that stressed at the footy for a long time. It was just like that prelim that the Cats played against the Pies in 07. It was very similar vibe to that. Better team, should win, but the Pies take it right up to us. Yeah, I was there, and I must admit, halfway through the last quarter, I had to get up and take a bit of a walk, mate. I was that stressed out. I think it might have been when DeGoey put that one through, and I thought, come on, guys, we can't get to the finals again and drop another one that we shouldn't. So it's small margins, isn't it? Because, I mean, the Pies will attest to that. This game and then their prelim, 1 point, like, gee, you just wonder if things go a different way, how it all pans out. But I'm bloody thankful it panned out well for us.
And it seemed like as well that, I love those games where just the stress and the blood's pumping and you just get excited, right? That being a North Melbourne fan, we've been on the opposite end of that. There's just been like, we just got smashed by 100 points again. Closer games are a lot better.
Oh, yeah. I mean, nothing gets the blood pumping and the heart racing like a close game, particularly in a final. It gets all very real very quick. So much is on the line. So, fortunately, Geelong came out on top. But, yeah, like you say, I think if you've followed footy for long enough, we've all endured some pretty painful moments on the wrong end of matches like that.
Definitely true. And I think you guys went on from memory to actually smash everyone else in the finals. So you kind of got your hard game out of the first, and then the rest were a lot easier.
Yeah, it took care of Brisbane, and we all know the Sydney result. So yeah, you're spot on. That was the arm wrestle game, and they were able to get it done.
All right. So just checking out who you brought into the team this year. So Jack Bowes, obviously that was pretty talked about when it happened. Premier's getting pick 7 alongside, Jack Bowes, a decent player. You also brought in Ollie Henry and Tanner Bruin. How do you feel like those 3 players are kind of got a fit? Do you think they'll be in the best 22 or guys who, will be depth and pushing for a spot?
Yeah, probably more the latter. I think they'll definitely be pushing, and we'll see them in some form throughout. But
Mm-hmm.
I think probably the best part of getting these guys was not so much what it'll do for 2023, but sort of 2025 and 26 and beyond. Because the Cats list was, like you said, a bit of a retirement home. Good
Yeah.
players, but getting old. So to
Mm-hmm.
get some of these guys who are, I'm pretty sure they're all ranging from about 20 to 24. Bose might be, older than the other guys, but I reckon that there's a spot for all 3 if they are good enough. But again, they'll battle pretty hard to get in there, which is awesome from a Cats point of view. But I definitely think, particularly Bruin, of all those guys, I just think I was most stoked to get him. I'm a big fan of what he can do probably in a couple of years.
Yeah. I have a feeling there that sneaky Rory Atkins made his face onto the Jack Bowes picture there. I'm not sure how that happened. I think the AFL did it's normal. Hey, let's just put whatever picture with a name like they have
Yeah.
on the website. So yeah.
I know. I was looking at it, I thought, oh, maybe it's just the pixels coming through on my laptop that's not too great or what's going on. But Jack's, the hair's not looking as good for Jack there. But
No, he's probably not as happy to come to Geelong either. So, yeah. And GWS continuing kind of the feed into Geelong at the moment. So Geelong's powerhouse kind of people talk about how good the team is, but it also comes from the under 18 side, right, as well. Like a lot of these amazing footballers will start start at the junior level, love the area, love living there, go off somewhere else and have that pull to come back home.
yeah, it's a good point. Pretty lucky in that regard. I think Geelong, with being a regional place, but still has a lot to offer. It's kind of that perfect balance. You've got the beach, but you're also not that far from Melbourne if that's your cup of tea. So
Yeah,
I
definitely.
think it's definitely been real handy for us. And like you say, a couple of Falcons of, not just through the draft, but over the journey through the trade period as well.
And it's a big draw card kind of being. Would you still consider Geelong being a beachy town, or is that kind of past it now?
Oh, probably. I mean, that's probably the beauty of it. I think I wouldn't, but if that's your vibe, it's right there for you. I
Yeah,
think that's
definitely.
what Geelong sort of has. Like, and you got Tommy Hawkins, Jezza Cameron. Like, if you want to go fishing or live the farm life, you can also do that and be 15 minutes away from, town and
Yeah,
you're
from the
not
club.
way out. Yeah, exactly. So certainly Geelong is growing, but still has a bit to offer with every bit of that lifestyle.
Yeah, definitely. So just looking at some players that you guys lost through delisting, but also trading. So Cooper Stevens heading over to the Hawks. It was one of your earlier picks a couple of years ago. How do you kind of feel about that one? Him leaving.
Oh, mate, that one hurts a bit, to be honest. I really didn't want to lose him. But then again, you probably can't sit here and talk about what we just talked about, getting those guys if you don't give up something.
Definitely.
But yeah, I was red hot on him. I think Colac boy, I thought he might have stuck around. I think he actually was a Hawthorn supporter, though. I didn't realise that. So might have been a happy man to get to the old junior supporting club. But we love to talk a bit of Supercoach, you and I, over the journey, and he'll definitely be one that I think is a real good chance to be a great option for the Hawks moving forward, but a sneaky one for us in Supercoach land, I reckon.
Yeah, definitely have a look at him next year and someone to watch through the preseason. So obviously you guys had kind of 3 bigger names leaving. So Selwood, Dalhouse and Higgins. They were just kind of, guys finishing up at least Selwood and Higgins, guys just kind of finishing up their careers, getting mid to late 30s. Do you think Dalhouse could have gone again, or he was kind of finishing up as well?
Yeah, I think right decision by all three of the guys. I think we particularly had seen with Dalhouse and Higgins a pretty strong decline in just the pace of the game. They looked like they were really struggling to keep up with the current game. And then, like we know, with that age, you get a few injuries and it starts to get a bit tougher getting up each week. And Joel was playing pretty good footy, but you could still see he wasn't the same sort of Joel that he once was. And certainly a few more quieter games here and there. And in the end, it was a perfect way to go out. And I'm really happy to see him go out the way he did. And no, I think fair call by all of those guys. Yeah.
And now he's off working at a rugby club, right?
Yeah.
Melbourne Storm, I think.
Yeah. He's at Storm. I thought he'd go somewhere. I didn't think rugby would be the vibe, but there you go. He was always going to walk into a job, wasn't he? Just leadership, definitely. Sort of mentor role. He was always going to find it pretty easy.
So outside of those three, and we've talked about Stevens, is there anyone in your delisted list there that you thought was kind of hard done by that maybe you would have liked to keep, or you're happy kind of with the players that left?
Pretty fair. I think Nick Stevens was one that surprised me. I'd heard a few good things about him throughout the year, that he was a nice ball user coming off the half-back line and wasn't at the club for too long. No. So I didn't expect him to go. But then again, I had only watched bits and pieces of him in the VFL, so I didn't really know. And probably Narkle was one that I think was absolutely fair. I mean, he just didn't take his chance. But a couple of years ago, I really thought that he would be a guy that would be eventually part of the Cats midfield, but he just never quite took the chance. And, you hear that he's maybe not the greatest trainer on the track of all time and never got that endurance level right up there. So wouldn't shock me if maybe one day he plays some good state league footy and gets a go, but he certainly has some talent.
Yeah, maybe a bit of a Corey Wagner, coming in and out and finding himself a team. And I think Zane Williams there was a small forward taken in the mid-season draft as well, so kind of just never really got a chance, I guess.
Yeah, a bit of a weird one, 6 months, and I guess they saw enough, which was interesting, but barely got to know him, and then he was out the door.
Definitely. Well, you guys obviously spent a lot of trade picks to get those players in. So just having a look at who you guys kind of drafted this year. So with your Gold Coast pick, I think it was a pretty early pick kind of compared to what you guys are used to, right? Normally you guys have picks in the teens, so having something in the top eights, it's been great for you.
Yeah, 100%. I think it might have been our most recent top 10 picks since Joel. I think Nakai Cockatoo might have been pick 10. So, yeah, great to have him. Yeah, and, no pressure on the young man. They just call him a Joel Selwood replacement. So, no pressure, mate. No pressure, mate. So, but, yeah, he looks great.
With pick 8, you guys brought in Jai Clark, inside midfielder. And then pick 52, you brought in Phoenix Foster. So a forward ruck player, I guess kind of more just like coverage and development, you'd think?
Definitely a bit of a project player, Foster will be. From the small highlights I've seen, he looks like he can certainly take a contested mark, and they say he's quite a reliable set shot. So pretty handy things to have. But yeah, he'll probably take a bit of time. I guess they might be thinking about life after Hawkins and Cameron. You've got Shannon Neal and potentially Phoenix Foster might be a guy that can hold down a key post in like 3-4 years.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like the club's kind of needing someone to cover maybe a Stanley type after that kind of older group starts to retire? Because obviously Radigalia kind of was touted as being that player, and you mentioned Neil, but neither of them have kind of come on as pushing for that spot. Do you feel like that's a need for the team, or he's basically just in there to develop and see what happens?
Yeah, I think Foster will be there to develop. Look, Toby Conway is probably the guy.
Mhm.
He is a highly touted youngster. Again, takes time for these guys, but there were stages last year where they were really pumping up his form in the VFL. So he would be the one that I would say, from what I can gather, he strikes me as a bit of a, sort of Sean Darcy, Shane Mumford operator, like that bigger body,
Yeah.
loves the workload. So not quite a Reece Stanley type, but I reckon he'll be Geelong's number one ruckman at some stage in the future. So yeah, I don't know. Stanley's probably a guy that he's definitely got a year in him, maybe two. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see because the Cats were linked to Grundy for a while. I was getting excited about that, but yeah. So it'll be interesting to watch.
And Goldstein as well. Whenever he came up for
Yeah.
contracts, always hey, is he going to Geelong type of player.
Yeah,
It's
that's
interesting,
true.
kind of, for a team that's won a premiership, not having like a set ruckman. It hasn't really hurt you as much. Obviously, you've got players who play through the role, but Geelong and ruckman, you never really think of the two things together, right? It's not Melbourne and
Yeah.
Max Gawn or Freo and Darcy, but it's worked out for you fine. So
Yeah, it's a strange one, and probably not since Brad Ottens have we seen a genuine, consistent ruck for the Cats. So they found a way to make it work because at times it had hurt us over the
mhm.
journey. But they, like I said before, that Blitzarv's role, yeah, it was a genius move and was able to make the most of the combination we had.
So in the rookie draft, you guys picked up Oscar Murdoch, and then you guys got a couple of gems here, it looks like, through the category B. So another Irishman joining the club, which is great. And Ted Closey, I'm going to call him Closey from now on. Gaelic Gun, from what I hear, does really well over there, and basically was supposed to be coming mid-year, but COVID and everything else, stopped that from happening. So
Yeah,
it worked out really well for you guys.
I think the Irish fella was
Oh, it's
Oisin
Oshin, yeah.
Oisin Mullen, I think it was. I think Ted. I don't know too much about. I think he's inside mid. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sure where he hails from, but yeah, that Oisin Mullen. Yeah, like you said, I thought we were going to have him throughout the year, and just didn't happen. Went back home, but yeah, he's back at the Cats now, and I mean their highlights always look amazing, but he does look like he actually has the build of a footballer, and I know their game doesn't have too much overhead marking, but he does it all right from what I've seen. So I was pretty excited about that. Very excited. Yeah.
I mean, you can get another Zach Tui. You're pretty
Yeah.
happy about that, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then your father's son in Oscar Riccardi. So great for you guys to kind of get him in for basically free as well. So worked out all
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. It's good to see the name come through. And I think, he's a pretty small, a bit of a different type of player, I think, to his dad, but
Mm.
they obviously saw enough in him to give him a crack. So yeah, Geelong have been pretty nicely treated by the father son over the journey. So hopefully it can keep going.
So we've spoken about the ruck a little bit. Looking at kind of the trade and draft this year, is there any holes in the team that you kind of feel like need to be addressed maybe next year, or like areas you think that maybe they need to start looking at bringing a player in from another club?
Yeah, it's always tough to say. I mean, you feel so good about everything when you win the flag, but like we touched on before with the ruck, I think there is still room for improvement, even though their current incarnation worked really well. Conway could be that guy. A halfback flanker is probably something the Cats would be looking for, like a genuine
Mm-hmm.
ball user. I think at times we saw Mitch Duncan do that. Tom Stewart can do it in a different style, but yeah, I think probably just overall speed. Geelong are obviously a really good, accomplished team. A lot of veterans in there, but there's probably not too many absolute line breakers. And Max Holmes added a lot to the side when he was in there. So potentially some speed, whereabouts on the field, whether it's half back or on a wing. But that might be the only thing, I reckon.
What's the forward stocks looking like? Like your key forwards? Do you guys have people coming through with like Hawkins and Cameron? Obviously, Cameron's not going to retire soon, but someone to cover
Mm.
Hawkins.
Yeah, it's probably Shannon Neal at the moment, from what I can tell. He at times was right in contention for a spot last year, and I think he did play maybe against Port Adelaide. He might have come on as a sub, so he's still a pretty raw product. But I think, yeah, injuries aside, it'll be Hawkins and Cameron for at least 12 months. But yeah, I'm hoping that Neil can really come on in leaps and bounds. And look, you never know. Foster doesn't seem like a ready-made type, but we could be proven wrong. You just never know. But Radigalia seems to be more so pinned to a defensive spot now. So yeah, that's a bit of a change up. Yeah.
You guys aren't keen to try and poach Max or Ben King in the next couple of years? Run him with Cameron?
Oh, look, I wouldn't be against making the phone call. I think,
Definitely.
yeah, it's always worth knocking on that door. That's for sure. Oh, the competition would absolutely hate us if we managed to pull something off that, something like that off. But no, you'd surely the King brothers play together at some stage. I just wonder where it will be.
They're interesting.
Yeah.
Anyways, so just checking out next year. So this was our kind of predictions for next year. So similar ladder position in the top four. I don't really see you guys kind of falling out of there, barring massive injuries, that kind of thing. So 17 wins, and just kind of a question posed for you for next year. So with Selwood leaving, what kind of do you see? How do you see the midfield working out? Obviously, he was a pretty big part in the midfield. So
yeah, it leaves a massive hole. Not as big a hole as it would have been, say, a couple of years ago. I mean, we saw Selwood play off the bench at times this year. I think the biggest thing we'll miss is the stuff we don't see, that leadership, pushing the standards at training. You can't replace that. But I think, of course, you can't replace a champion like that in the click of the fingers. But the likes of Brandon Parfitt will get more exposure in there. Tommy Atkins, like I mentioned, Guthrie will just continue playing a big role in there. And then you never know. If Jack Bowes wants to come over and play midfield, has a good preseason, maybe it's him. Tanner Bruin could finally explode and get that opportunity. I'm not too sure. But there are probably guys in there that have been wanting opportunities in the midfield. And this is obviously a chance for them to get that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Should be interesting to watch.
Do you think you can do back-to-back, or are you kind of just hoping to make finals again next year?
Pretty confident on top four, but then from there, it's so hard to say. I mean, going back-to-back is so tough. I mean, every year you sit here and it looks pretty hard for the reigning premier to not be in the grand final again, because we haven't seen any footy since. But so much has to go right. I think Geelong will put themselves in a good spot. They'll have a chance to play prelims, I'm sure. Whether they'll be good enough, we had a beautiful run with injury. So I'm hopeful, but certainly not sitting here saying we're like a Hawthorn three-peat or a Richmond. I don't think, I'm not talking dynasties here. I just think Geelong often give themselves a chance, and if they're good enough,
definitely.
yeah, you just never know.
And I guess like Brisbane getting better, Collingwood obviously getting better as well. You're
Yeah,
pushing,
and I'm pretty big on Carlton and Fremantle as well. I mean, that might not necessarily be flag talk, but and which way do Sydney go? Does that grand final knock the stuffing out of them, or does it push them to go even further? So it's a pretty tight comp, isn't it, mate?
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, Shorty, thanks for coming on the show today and chatting Geelong. It's been great having you on. Do you mind just kind of telling people what you've got coming up? Obviously, Supercoach is going to be starting up again soon. Do you have lots of ideas of things you're going to do content for, or you just kind of see how you go?
Yeah, for sure. Nah, thanks for having me on, mate. It's been good to chat as always. Yeah, I haven't put anything out this year just yet, since footy season's finished, but I'm thinking probably just before Christmas or around that mark, I might pump a couple of videos out. I normally start with the club by club previews and just see where it takes me, but yeah, once we start, we'll be turning those videos out pretty regularly. So stay tuned for that.
Definitely true.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks for coming. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe if you want to see some more content, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.
Cheers, guys.